The day my mother told the hospital administrator I was just the cleaning staff who happened to show up, I was standing 3 feet behind her in a blazer that cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. I didn't say a word. I just watched her smooth her cardigan, tilt her chin up the way she always did when she wanted people to think she was someone important, and continue explaining to the woman at the front desk that she needed to speak with whoever was in charge of the cardiology wing immediately, because her son-in-law was a donor, and she was certain someone could make an exception for her. The administrator glanced at me. I gave her the smallest shake of my head. She looked back at my mother. "Of course, ma'am. Let me see what I can do." My mother didn't even turn around to check if I was still there. That's the thing about being invisible for so long. You stop expecting people to look. My name is Lena. I'm 41 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have been the kind of person who exists in the margins of her own family's story. Not because I was quiet, not because I failed, but because the role my mother assigned me when I was 8 years old, the difficult one, the serious one, the one who doesn't fit, was so thoroughly written into the script of our family that no amount of achievement could rewrite it. I grew up in Tulsa. My mother, Sandra, was the kind of woman who ran the church bake sale and knew everyone's business and had a handshake so warm you'd mistake it for affection even when it wasn't. She had 2 children, my older brother Derek, who she called her Easy Baby, and me, who she never gave a nickname. Derek was charming. He smiled at the right times, said the right things, borrowed money without guilt, and spent it without hesitation. He married a woman named Pam who laughed at all of Sandra's jokes and sent birthday cards on time. They lived 20 minutes from my mother, had 3 kids Sandra could show off at Christmas, and in return Sandra co-signed Derek's truck loan, let him and Pam stay at her house for 7 months when they hit a rough patch, and referred to him in every conversation as her rock. I left Tulsa at 17 on a full academic scholarship to the University of Michigan, pre-med. Sandra told her friends I was going to school up north somewhere. She said it the way you'd say someone moved to a less desirable zip code. I called every Sunday for the first 2 years. She was usually busy. I graduated with honors, got into med school at Northwestern, finished my residency at a hospital in Chicago, and then, because apparently I wasn't done being stubborn about the life I wanted, pursued a fellowship in interventional cardiology. I was 32 years old when I performed my first solo structural heart procedure. I stood in that OR, with my hands steady and my mind clear, and I thought, this is the only place in the world where I am exactly who I am supposed to be. My mother called that week to ask if I could help Derek with a car payment. He'd gotten behind. I sent the money. I'm not proud of that. But I want to explain it, because I think a lot of people hear a story like mine and think, how could someone that accomplished be that naive? And the honest answer is that intelligence and emotional healing are not the same thing. I could read an echocardiogram in seconds. I could explain the fluid dynamics of a mitral valve repair to a room full of medical students without notes. But the moment my mother's voice went quiet on the phone, that particular quiet that meant she was disappointed in me, that I had somehow failed again, at a test she never told me I was taking, I would fold like I was still 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, being told that I always made everything harder than it needed to be. I sent money because I wanted, desperately and stupidly, to be the kind of daughter who was easy to love. It took me a long time to understand that some people don't choose to love easily. They choose to love conveniently. The financial transfers started small, $300 here, a car insurance payment. Derek's kids' braces, because you're the one with the doctor money. Lena was a sentence my mother said without embarrassment, as if I were a vending machine with a specialty selection. Over time it grew. A down payment on Derek and Pam's first house, $42,000, structured as a family loan that everyone understood would never be repaid. Sandra's HVAC unit when it went out in August. 2 rounds of private school tuition for Derek's oldest because the public school in their district just isn't safe, which I later found out meant it wasn't ranked highly enough for Pam's taste. I kept records, not because I planned to use them, just because I'm a physician and I document everything by instinct. Between the ages of 28 and 39, I transferred approximately $310,000 to members of my immediate family. That number includes $18,000 in emergency medical bills for my mother's knee surgery, which she had at my hospital, in my department, and which she introduced to the billing coordinator as having been paid by Derek's connections. I was standing right there when she said it. I didn't correct her. I need to tell you about Dr. James Whitmore because he's part of this story in a way that matters. James was my attending during residency, the kind of doctor who walked into a room and the room reorganized itself around him, not because he demanded it, but because he had the kind of quiet authority that made everyone instinctively understand who the most important person was. He was the first person who ever said to me, out loud, in plain language, "You are going to run a department someday, probably several. Don't let anyone talk you out of that." I laughed. He didn't. We worked together for 9 years. He became my mentor, then my colleague, then my closest professional advocate. When the position of Chief of Cardiology opened up at Hargrove Medical Center, a 740-bed Level 1 trauma and cardiac specialty center in Dallas, James was the one who called me at 6 in the morning and said, "They're going to offer it to someone else if you don't apply in the next 48 hours. I already told them you're the only name worth considering." I applied, I got the position, I was 39 years old, Chief of Cardiology, Hargrove Medical Center, one of the top cardiac programs in the country. I told my mother. She said, "Oh, that's good. Hey, can you talk to Derek? He's having some trouble at his job, and I think he just needs some encouragement from someone he respects." I told Derek. He said, "Nice. Hey, do you know anything about refinancing? Pam and I are thinking about pulling equity." I told no one else in my family. I moved to Dallas. I bought a house, 4 bedrooms on a quiet street near a park, and I paid for it in full. I had a financial advisor by then, a woman named Christine, who had been gently and persistently telling me for 3 years that what I was doing with my family was not a financial decision, it's an emotional one, and that it was going to cost me. She helped me restructure everything. I set up a limited monthly transfer to my mother, enough to cover her utility bills and groceries, not enough to cover Derek's choices, and I stopped answering calls that came in past 8 p.m. It wasn't a clean break, it was more like stopping a slow bleed. You press down, you hold, and eventually the wound starts to close, even though your hands are still shaking. My mother did not understand why the money slowed down. She didn't ask directly. Sandra never asked for anything directly. What she did instead was call me every few weeks with a rotating series of small disasters: Derek's transmission, Pam's mother's funeral expenses, one of the grandkids needing new glasses, and frame each one as a piece of information she thought I'd want to know, no ask. Just the information hanging in the air. I started saying, "I'm sorry to hear that, I hope it works out." The first time I said it, there was a silence on the phone so long I checked to make sure the call was still connected. "That's all you're going to say?" she asked. "I love you, Mom, but I can't keep doing this." "Doing what, Lena?" "I didn't ask you for anything." "I know." Another silence. Then, "You always did make things harder than they needed to be." There it was, still word for word, 20 years later, and she still had the same line. I said, "I'll talk to you next Sunday," and I got off the phone and I sat in my kitchen in Dallas with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and I felt something I couldn't quite name at the time. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter. Something like the moment before you make an incision. That held breath, that stillness, before you commit. The visit happened 14 months after I took the chief position. My mother called on a Tuesday and said she was coming to Dallas to see a friend from her church group who'd moved there a few years back. Her tone was casual, breezy, the way it always was when she wanted something she hadn't said out loud yet. She mentioned, nearly as an afterthought, that she'd love to see the hospital, since I've never actually seen where you work. "You're welcome to stop by," I said. "I'll let the front desk know." What I did not do, and this is the part I've turned over in my mind 100 times since, was explain what where I work actually meant. My mother knew I was a cardiologist. She knew I was at a hospital in Dallas. What she did not know, because I had never led with titles the way she led with Derek's LinkedIn job changes, was that I was the department chief, that my name was on the signage, that when I walked into a room, people stood up. I didn't tell her because, honestly, I was tired of explaining myself to someone who had already decided who I was. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon with Sandra's friend, a pleasant woman in her 60s named Carolyn, who had the good grace to seem genuinely interested in everything and asked smart questions, and I met them in the main lobby. I was coming straight from rounds. I had my badge clipped to my coat, my stethoscope around my neck, and I was moving at the pace I always move, which my residents have as not quite running but definitely not walking. My mother looked me up and down in the lobby and said, "You look tired. Good to see you too, Mom." We started toward the elevator. I had arranged for a brief tour, the public areas, nothing clinical, nothing that would compromise any patient privacy, and I had also quietly let my assistant know we were coming so that the floor wouldn't be caught off guard. We were halfway to the elevator bank when we were stopped by a man I didn't immediately recognize. He was in his late 50s, expensive suit, visitor's badge, and he had the confident stride of someone used to being recognized. He extended his hand toward my mother before I could say anything. "Sandra, is it? Derek mentioned you might be visiting." He smiled broadly. "I'm Phil Garrett. I serve on the hospital board. Derek and I play golf. He told me his sister works here. I was hoping to run into you both." I blinked. Derek had told a board member that his sister worked. Phil Garrett was looking at me with the specific expression of a man who had been told something and was trying to reconcile it with what he was seeing. My mother said, "Oh, how wonderful. Yes, Lena's been here for a little while. She's in cardiology, I think. She does something with the department. Some kind of administrative support role." Phil Garrett's expression flickered, just for a second. Administrative support, he repeated. She's always been better at the behind-the-scenes work, my mother continued, with the warmth of someone who genuinely believed she was being complimentary. Not really the frontline type. You know how some people are, better in the back office. I watched Phil Garrett look from my mother to me. I watched him look at my badge. I watched the exact moment it registered. Because my badge at Hargrove Medical Center does not say Lena Park MD. It says DR. Lena Park, Chief of Cardiology, Hargrove Medical Center. Below my name, embossed and unmistakable, is the seal of the American College of Cardiology and the Hargrove Department of Medicine insignia. A small gold medallion on a lanyard most people at the hospital would recognize immediately. Phil Garrett read my badge. Then he straightened. Then he said, in a completely different tone than the one he'd been using, Dr. Park, I apologize, I didn't realize. I'm Phil Garrett, board member. We've corresponded by email, but I don't think we've actually met in person. He extended his hand again, this time to me. His handshake was different now, more careful. The handshake of someone recalibrating. Phil. I shook his hand. Good to finally put a face to the emails. My mother had gone very still. Carolyn, God bless her, looked at the badge, looked at my mother, and very tactfully became intensely interested in the framed artwork on the opposite wall. Chief of Cardiology, Phil Garrett said, not loudly, but not quietly either. I have to say, your department's outcomes last quarter were exceptional. The board has been very impressed with the direction you've been taking the program. Thank you, I said. We have a strong team. My mother said nothing. We stood there for a moment, one of those moments that lasts exactly as long as it needs to for everyone to fully absorb what has just happened. And then I said, pleasantly, Phil, if you'll excuse us, I have a tour to finish. Of course. He nodded. Dr. Park, great to meet you. He walked away. My mother turned to me slowly. Her face was doing something I had never seen it do before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something rawer than either of those. Something closer to shock. The particular shock of a person who suddenly realizes that the story she has been telling about someone for 30 years doesn't match the person standing in front of her. Chief of Cardiology, she said. Yes. Since when? 2 years ago. She looked at my badge again, then at me. Then, and this was the part I hadn't expected, she looked at Carolyn, who had given up pretending to look at the artwork and was watching us with quiet concern. My mother said very quietly, you never told me. I told you I got a new position. You asked me to talk to Derek about refinancing. She didn't have a response to that. The tour was strange, quiet, in a way that felt different from the comfortable quiet I'd made peace with over the years. This was the quiet of someone rearranging furniture in their head, moving things around to see if they fit differently. My residents greeted me the way they always did. Good afternoon, Dr. Park, heads nodding, one of the interns holding the door before I even reached it out of habit. The charge nurse on the cardiac floor, a woman named Viv who had worked with me since I'd arrived, and who said exactly what she thought about everything, looked up from her station when we came around the corner and said, Dr. Park, the Hendricks family is asking if you have 5 minutes before end of rounds. I'll stop by, I said. Viv glanced at my mother and Carolyn with the efficient assessment of someone who has 30 things to do and a good eye for social dynamics. Family visit? She asked me, not unkindly. My mother, I said. Viv smiled at Sandra. You must be proud. My mother said, yes, in the voice of someone who was just then deciding that she was. I showed them the public atrium, the chapel, the cardiac rehabilitation gym with its wall of windows overlooking the courtyard. My mother walked beside me, and she was different. The tilt of her chin was gone, replaced by something uncertain, a posture I didn't have a name for because I had never seen her wear it before. She kept glancing at my name on door frames, on the placard outside my office, on the little printed schedule that one of my assistants had left on the hallway kiosk, showing the weekly department schedule, with my name at the top, followed by 11 other physicians. She stopped outside my office. The door was open. My desk was visible, the organized stacks of research files, the 2 monitors, the framed photo of me and James at a medical conference 2 years ago, both of us grinning because we had just presented research that would go on to be published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. On the wall beside my desk was the thing I'd forgotten she hadn't seen, the credentials wall. Every physician's office at Hargrove has one, not by vanity, but by administrative policy. Patients and families who visit the department need to be able to verify qualifications. Mine had my medical degree from Northwestern, my residency certificate, my board certification, my fellowship diploma, and in the center's slightly larger, the framed letter of appointment to the Chief of Cardiology position, signed by the hospital CEO and the board chair. Below all of it, there was a single photograph I'd put up myself. It was taken at a pediatric cardiac camp I'd volunteered at 3 summers ago. A group of kids, 8 to 14, all of them with congenital heart conditions, all of them grinning in oversized t-shirts. I'm in the back, also grinning, in the same oversized t-shirt. My mother looked at the wall for a long time. Then she said, I didn't know you did things like that. With children, there's a lot you don't know, I said. I didn't say it cruelly. I was just tired, and when I'm tired, the filters come down. You've never asked. She turned from the wall to look at me. Lena, Mom, I kept my voice level. I love you, and I'm glad you're here. But I don't want to have this conversation in my office. She nodded, pressed her lips together, looked back at the wall one more time. Carolyn, who had been the most emotionally intelligent person in every room we'd entered all afternoon, gently touched my mother's elbow and said, Sandra, why don't we let Lena get back to her patients? Maybe dinner tonight? We had dinner at a restaurant near my house. Good food, quiet booths, the kind of place where you can have a real conversation without anyone nearby caring. Carolyn excused herself early, which I will always be grateful for, and it was just me and my mother in a corner booth with 2 glasses of wine and about 30 years of accumulated silence between us. She started 3 sentences before she finished one. She said, I didn't. She said, I always thought. She said, Derek told me, and then she stopped. She picked up her wine glass and set it back down. She looked at her hands. I think I told myself a story, she said finally. About you. About what kind of person you were. What kind of daughter. I waited. You were always so. She paused. You didn't need me. You never seemed to need any of us. You just left and became this. She gestured vaguely in the direction of the hospital, in the direction of my life, and I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand. So you just weren't, I said. I know. You called me administrative support. I know. She closed her eyes. Lena, I'm sorry. It was not a grand moment. There was no music, no dramatic pause. She just said it the way people say things when they mean them. Quietly, without decoration, in the booth of a restaurant in Dallas on a Thursday night. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't entirely. But I also didn't say nothing, because she was still my mother, and she was 71 years old, and she had just, in the span of an afternoon, discovered that the story she'd been telling had a character she'd invented who had nothing to do with the person sitting across from her. I know you didn't do it to hurt me, I said. I know you did it because it was easier. She nodded. But I need you to understand, I continued, that it still hurt, every time. And I can't keep sending money to Derek to try to earn something he already decided I didn't deserve. She was quiet for a long time. Then, how long have you been feeling this way? About 30 years, I said. She laughed, surprised herself with it, then stopped, because it wasn't really funny and we both knew it. I have a lot to make up for, she said. You do, I agreed. But I'm not going anywhere. So we have time. I'm not going to tell you that everything changed overnight, because it didn't. Sandra went home to Tulsa and spent what I can only imagine was a complicated couple of weeks. She called me the following Sunday, and we talked for 45 minutes, which was 30 minutes longer than we had ever talked voluntarily. She didn't mention Derek's finances. She asked about the pediatric camp, when it was, what the kids were like, how long I'd been involved. She asked if she could come again sometime, not to see anything in particular, just to visit. Yes, I said. Come whenever you want. She asked about the photograph on my wall, the one from the conference with James. I told her about the research, about the paper, about what it meant for how we treat a specific type of valve disease in patients under 50. She didn't understand all of it, but she listened. She asked questions, real ones. Derek called me the following month. He had heard something from my mother, and he wanted to know, his word, what was going on. I told him I loved him and that I was no longer in a position to continue what we had been doing with money, and that if he wanted to have an actual relationship with me, he was welcome to call me just to talk sometime. Not only when something had broken or run out. He hung up. He called back 3 weeks later and we talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular, his kids, a fishing trip he'd taken, a TV show he'd been watching. It was the most normal conversation we had ever had. He didn't ask for anything. I don't know what that means yet. I'm trying to stay open to it. What I know is this. I spent a very long time being invisible in my own family because I thought that was the price of belonging. I thought if I stayed small enough, stayed useful enough, eventually they would see me. Eventually someone would look up from the story they were telling and find me in it. It took a gold embossed badge and a board member, who knew how to read one for my own mother, to look at me and see what was actually there. I wish it had happened differently. I wish she had just asked, one Sunday when I called, how things were going. I wish she had wanted to know. I wish I'd had the courage to tell her without waiting to be discovered. But here we are, and I have learned, later than I should have but not too late, that I do not need anyone's recognition to know who I am. I knew who I was in that OR at 32 with my hands steady and my mind clear. I knew it every time I sat with a family in a waiting room and told them their person was going to be okay. I knew it in the quiet of my own office, in my own house, in the life I built without anyone's co-signature or approval. The badge just meant other people finally knew it too. And honestly, that's enough.